Action.
Right, good evening everybody. Right, originally I wrote this small presentation on PowerPoint, or the Apple equivalent, which is Keynote. Unfortunately for the projector I haven't got the adapter for the lead, so I'm just going to read it out, and at the end I will email the Keynote presentation in either Keynote format or the Microsoft equivalent, so that you can have a look at it and refresh your memories. So what we're going to talk about tonight is basically HF radio on single sideband. Not FM, not CW, it's single sideband. FM, as you know, you key up on FM and you see your power straight away. With SSB you don't. You only see movement of your meters when you speak. I think we're all aware of that on SSB. Now, to get a good signal out on SSB, you need to make sure that you set your mic gain, and you get your ALC and your compression and equalizer settings correct. This is very, very important if you're an M6, M7 or a 2E0. More important than if you're a full license, because you're running lower power. And you've got to make sure you take advantage and get every single watt out, otherwise you're going to struggle. Now these settings are something that's very often overlooked by radio hams. They buy, let's say you buy an HF base station rig, they normally cost £1,000 upwards, don't they? And you open the box, a nice shiny new radio, and what do they send it to you with? A cheap Chinese hand mic that you can pick up off eBay for a tenner. And I don't care whether it's Yaesu, Icon or Kenwood, they're all the same. And they're rubbish. One thing if anybody buys themselves a HF set and they predominantly want to do HF single sideband on home voice, upgrade your microphone. The best thing you can do to get out. Right, so let's have a look at some of the things you have to do on a HF SSB phone. Advantages of getting your correct mic gain, ALC and compression right are: your mic gain, ALC and compression set correctly will help to give you the best chance of being heard, especially when you're running lower power, as I've just said, M7s, 2E0s. It's important to give you nice punchy audio, and especially to be heard in pilots. Now, no setting is going to help you compete with an Italian running a kilowatt with a beam, as we can find out, we can testify. Nothing is going to help you compete with that. Even an M0 is limited to 400 watts, so we can't compete with Italians on a kilowatt. But it is important that when you are making these contacts on HF SSB, to get nice punchy audio, and it allows you to be heard. And sometimes you will break a pilot depending on the conditions. And it also gives you the maximum RF power to your antenna. Because as we said before, you key up on FM, you can see straight away if you've set your RF power to 100 watts, the power goes straight to 100. Whereas with SSB, you key up, you see nothing until you speak. When you speak, you'll then see your meters moving. If you haven't got the mic gain set correctly, but you've set your RF power to say 10 watts, 50 watts, 100 watts, you might see, if you've not set it correctly, it's not going up to the right setting. It's not going up to 50 watts, it's not going up to 100 watts. And I'll guarantee it's down to your mic gain, and I'll guarantee it's down to having the correct compression set. Always make sure you tune for the minimum SWR before. It sounds obvious, but people do forget. Make sure you've tuned to the minimum SWR before you do any tests to do these settings. Unless, of course, you're using the dummy load. Right, HFSSB phone, the consequences of having incorrect mic gain, ALC and compression settings can be, if you've set it too low, you won't be heard when replying to a CQ call, and you won't get replies when making a CQ call. If you set it too high, you might sound distorted, and at worst you might splatter over to another frequency. It's especially important, as I've said, at a foundation and intermediate level, and too little mic gain means loss of RF power to your antenna. Now if I'm on 100 watts and Ron, you're on 10 watts, and we both set our mic gains incorrectly, I might lose, say, 10 watts to my antenna, and I'm only getting 90 watts out or 80 watts out. You set it wrongly. Instead of getting your 10 watts out, you might only be getting 3 watts out. So it's more, that's why I say it's very important for the lower power levels. Now there are different microphone types. Now what a lot of people do, they get a nice shiny new radio and they pick up the hand mic that comes with it, they plug it in and away they go. They've not made any settings and they don't make many contacts, and they think it's either the radio or the antenna. The antenna, of course, is probably the most important part of any chain of your signal. So if you've got a decent antenna and a decent radio and you're not making decent contacts, I would say that you need to have a look at your mic gain, ALC and compression. Now when I talk about different microphone types and upgrading it, the best thing you can do is to go to a desk mic from the hand mic. Now Icon do a lot of deals, Yaesu do a lot of deals, where you buy the radio and it comes with a free desk mic. Now I've already said that the hand mic with most radios will cost about 15 quid on eBay. The SM30 for an Icon is £100 and odd pound. The equivalent for a Yaesu, what's the Yaesu one you've got, Nige? The
MD100, I think.
MD100, again about 100 quid. And those two microphones for Icon and Yaesu are the two best purchases you'll buy after buying your radio, to be perfectly honest. Put that hand mic in the box and get yourself a nice desk mic. You can actually use these sort of things if you've got the right mounts for them. Ron will recognise these. That's a Shure.
I've got one of those on that.
These are brilliant. Now the Shure, this is an SM, no it's not, it's a PG48. It's the cheaper end of the Shure microphones. If you're doing a lot of singing or vocals in a band, the SM58 is the industry standard. But for vocals where you're just doing a presentation, like I'm doing if it was in a bigger room and mic'd up, that's perfectly adequate. So that tells you that that would do equally as well for radio. But unfortunately, it does have an XLR fitting. So you have to get the right lead to go from XLR to whatever your radio is. The Yaesu, the Kenwood or the Icon. Now there is another thing that's worth mentioning. When you change your microphone, maybe you've done all these settings with one particular microphone, but you decide to change it. Reset your settings again, because every mic might be a different setting. That might have more gain than that might have more gain than something else, and so on and so forth. That particular mic is the one I use all the time. That is a Heil PR781G. The G stands for gold. You can buy a 718 that has that black. That is a cracking microphone, but they are expensive. That costs 200 quid. You also need a shock mount to go on a boom stand on your desk to put that in, and you need the correct lead from the microphone to your rig. There's no push to talk on it, so you need a foot switch. So it's quite an expensive outlay. That's 200 quid. A boom stand, The dedicated Heil boom stand is 100 odd quid. The shock mount is nearly 100 quid, and then you need a foot switch. Now the Heil foot switch is about 70 quid. I use a guitar one that I use when I'm playing guitar. It costs a tenner from a music shop, and it does exactly the same thing. So you buy the dedicated lead, and the dedicated lead comes with a 1/4-inch jack plug socket to plug the foot switch in that you put on the floor, and you operate and push the top like that. So I'd recommend those, but if you don't want to make that outlay, get a dedicated desk mic for whichever radio you've got, Kenwood, Icon, whatever. Now it's worth mentioning with Icon are a bit different than most. They use phantom power. So if you don't get the correct lead with a resistor in it, and you put in phantom power into one of these that are not meant to take phantom power, you'll end up doing damage to it. Or, at worst, you might even damage the radio. Now modern Icons, like the 7610, which I've got, allows you to switch the phantom power off. I'm not sure whether the 7300 does. But if you've got this dedicated lead with the resistor in, which you definitely need for Icon, you don't need to worry about that, because the resistor will dissipate the phantom power coming from the rig. Do you understand what I'm saying? The rig sends phantom power to an Icon mic. Now if you're using a non-dedicated microphone on an Icon like these, you will have to set your mic gain a lot higher, because there's no phantom power. So always bear that one in mind. You may have to put your mic gain up to 80 or 90%, whereas on a dedicated Yaesu rig with a Yaesu microphone you might have it at 50, and with a dedicated Icon you might have it at 50. Yours is at 50. I use that one and it's set at 80 to 90%, so you can see the difference. Like I said, my Icon 7610 allows the phantom power to be turned off, but older Icons don't, so that is doubly important that you have the correct lead. To make doubly sure, I turn the phantom power off and I use the correct lead, so I'm covered both ways. And then I can use studio type mics with my rig. Some desk mics that you get, like the SM30, the one that Nigel's got for his Yaesu, have a mic gain setting on the desk mic. So I always suggest you don't do any of these, what I'm going to tell you in a minute, until you've set the gain on the desk mic to halfway. Roughly about 50%, roughly, no more. If you do that, then you can start doing the rest of what I'm going to tell you. So how do we set for best audio when transmitting HF SSB, when we're talking about mic gain? The first thing you do, well, too little mic gain can make your signal difficult to copy, we've covered that. Too much mic gain could cause your signal to distort. And always start by setting your mic gain with your compression turned off. Find a quiet band or a frequency to test or use a dummy load. That goes without saying really. And for etiquette purposes, if you are testing, it is good etiquette and good practice to give your call sign. Start at about 50% mic gain. So you turn your mic gain control on your rig to roughly about 50%. With your RF power set to 100% of your legal limit. So my 7610 is a 100 watt rig, so I'd set my power to 100. Ron, you'd set yours to 10 watts to be legal, and Nigel 2E0 would set his to 50, and that's your legal power. Then you speak into the microphone from a distance of about 1 inch, and it's always good not to speak into the microphone like that, because that's when you get the sound coming from the receiving station, because of your lips the way you form syllables. Try and use it that way, and you find you get a lot better. So that's just one little tip. Adjust your mic gain so the meter reads about 50 to 75% of the ALC scale. Now I've put up a diagram here. Hope you can all see it. The icons, the 7300s and the 7610, allow you to put a multimeter up on your screen, which shows your S meter, your power out, your ALC line there, compression level, SWR, and the ampage that the radio is drawing from your power supply. So you can see everything on that 1 meter. Some radios don't have that facility. Sometimes you have to scroll between your S meter, your power meter, your ALC, your comp and your SWR, but it depends what radio you've got, really. But I've got a multimeter on mine, so it makes it a bit easier. So when I say speak into the microphone from about 1 inch and adjust the mic gain to start off at about 50%. And what you want to see when you speak it is the ALC scale, which is that one there. That's the one we're interested in at the moment. On mine it turns blue. As I'm talking, it's flicking up like that. Because it's SSB, don't forget, it doesn't go constant, it goes with your voice. You want to see it going to about there, or most about there. If it peaks every now and again within that scale there, that's fine. If you find that some of the peaks are going up here, turn your mic gain down. If it's down here somewhere, turn your mic gain up. And get it so it's there, within that scale. Is everybody following this so far? Yeah? Alright, right? Once you've done that, that's your mic gain, more or less, set. Once you've got that 50 to 75% on the ALC scale. The next thing we're going to talk about, I've already shown you the meter. It's a picture of it on here, but compression. If you're a musician, Ron might know what I'm talking about here. You'll know what compression is. Guitars, you buy a compression pedal. Amplifiers have a compression setting. But what is it? What does it do? Compression, what it does, using compression can make your audio sound more polished by controlling maximum levels and maintaining higher average loudness. Put simply, it amplifies quiet sounds and it reduces loud sounds. Think of the word compression, and if you've got a line and that's the low end, so that's the quiet end, and that's the loud end, yeah? Because every time we speak, some syllables we form in with our mouths are louder than others. Alan will know what I'm talking about here. When you're talking on HF radio, there are times when you give your call sign and there's one letter they can't get. It might be, with me, it's normally Juliet. Now when I say Juliet, the Jew bit is louder than the iet. Juliet. It fades off. Now what compression does, think of the word compression, you're compressing that. You're bringing that closer to that and that closer to that. Do you understand what I mean by that? So you're making the low parts of your speech louder and the really loud parts of your speech come lower. So you're compressing the signal. The danger is to put too much compression on. Makes your audio sound distorted, boxy, horrible, really. So, how do you set it? We've already done the mic gain. So what we need to do now is set the compression. Start with your compression setting between 1 and 2 only, no more. Mine goes up to about 10 on the dial, on the compressor, compression setting. Other radios vary. I always start 1 to 2. Speak into the mic, again doing a test, and adjust the compression so you can see between 5 and 10 decibels on the compression meter. That's that one. So now, when you speak into the microphone, you put your compressor on to between 1 and 2. You're looking to see compression level flicking up between between 5 and 10 decibels only. If it peaks just above, don't worry, but you want to see, as you're speaking, it's doing that between 5 and 10. If it's only doing that, as you speak, turn your compressor up a bit. If it's going up here somewhere, turn it down a bit. Are you alright with that? Now, the danger is, once you've got the compressor on and you're testing and you've got that right, you've sent your ALC out because you're putting more power on the low end because you're compressing it and bringing the lows up. You might find your ALC, instead of being there, has now gone peaking up here. What do? Turn the mic gain down a little bit. Yeah. And what you're looking for is that as you speak, you've got that, you tweak the settings so that you get your ALC around there and you get your compressor between 5 and 10, and you look where the the power meter is flicking up to. Now if you've set it at 10 watts, you should see as you speak it's going up there like that to 10 watts. That shows you're putting the maximum power out that you've set it to. Nigel had set his to 50, so he'd be seeing that. I might set mine to 100, I'd be seeing that. Does that make sense? Now these settings will then put you in the right ballpark for good quality audio. And like I said before, these are settings that are overlooked quite a lot because people can't be bothered. They think, oh, it'll be alright, set on the defaults, it'll be okay. It might be set too high, it might be set too low, and they can't understand why they're not making contacts. Finally, set your equalisation. Do we all know what equalisation is? We're talking here about bass and treble, primarily, for voice speech. An icon is dead easy, because you go in the menu and you've got a setting for bass and a setting for treble. Now my settings for the 7610, I have a transmit bandwidth of mid. Most rigs allow you to set either narrow, mid or high. I set mine to mid because I'm not interested in contesting and I'm interested in DXing. I recommend narrow bandwidth for contesting and wide bandwidth for rack tuning on 40 metres during the day into G. So a mid, if it's got a setting, put it on mid. Find your treble and bass settings and roll off the bass and increase the treble. Now I always roll off mine, the bass that is, to -2. And I put up the treble to +2. And that allows a bit more punch. Because the bit more treble it punches out better. Otherwise if you've got too much bass it can sound a bit down here. So those settings seem to work for the icon. They work for yours, don't it, when I set yours? Yeah, yeah. So if you do that, you're in the right ballpark. But what you need to then do, if you've got a monitor setting on your rig, plug in your headphones and listen to yourself. But don't try and do it through the speaker because you get horrible feedback. put your headphones in, put your headphones on, do your test, declare your call sign, testing, M0JYP, testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and see what it sounds like to you. If you think it's still a bit, adjust something. Maybe turn the bass up a bit, maybe turn the treble down more. Get it to the liking of your ears, basically. But I find those settings that I've just said, always, without question, when I'm on HF radio, gives me brilliant audio reports. Whenever I say, what's my audio like? Superb. Don't change anything, it's bang on. Right, so basically, that is it. But a lot of people don't do that. And they just carry on talking and wondering why they're getting bad audio reports, they're not making the trip, people are not answering them, and so on. I hope that helps. Has anybody got any questions? Or did it make sense? Yeah? Nige?
What's ID?
ID, the bottom one. It's showing, as you speak on single sideband or key up on FM, where you get a constant,
Yeah.
it's showing what the rig is drawing in power.
So what's that ID stand for?
No idea.
That's what I meant.
Right. That's 10 amps,
Right.
20 amps, 30 amps.
Probably eyes for current flow,
Yeah.
and D is for drive.
Right, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yes,
Right.
it could be, couldn't it? Because if you go back to your,
So it's a current.
if you go back to your triangle from Ohm's law,
Right, I see what you mean, yeah. Yeah.
Ohm's law.
yeah, the I, it's always I, isn't it, for power? Yeah,
Right, yeah.
yeah. Well done, Ray. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Memory.
yeah. So that's what I see on my rig, you see,
Yeah.
when I put the multimeter on. If you've got a Yaesu, it might be something different.
Well, it is because you only see one at a time, don't you?
Yeah, you might have to
You can't
scroll,
Yeah.
like we did with Alan this morning.
Yeah.
We were scrolling
You can
through
see,
to find the right
one.
And
One
Kev
of
would
them.
do like,
Yeah.
you could only do one at a time.
I do like this multimeter.
It is good that, yeah, I do like that.
Because you can see everything. It's in front of you at a glance, and it makes these settings become quite easy.
Even on the 7300, you can actually put that on, and you can still see a little bit of your waterfall and your frequency as well. It's
Right.
smaller.
Yeah, but you can see it.
But you can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't see that on
That's the problem we had with the rig,
Yeah,
obviously, when
to
Alan came down and reset it.
the.
Anything else? Any other questions?
But again, it's just ready before you.
Yeah, before you do anything, obviously, you want to do a test. Doesn't matter what your mic settings are at this point.
Yeah.
You want to speak and get that as low as possible first,
Mm.
whichever band you're on. I think that goes without saying. I think most of us wouldn't transmit with an SWR up here somewhere.
No.
You know, you want to get that down. With whatever method you use, it might be the internal tuner, or you might have an external tuner. You know, but make sure you get it right before you start.
A
That's
good
the main
idea
thing.
as well is, I'm doing any testing, I use 12 meters, because it's
It's a quiet band.
a quiet band, not
Yeah.
many people use it, no one ever bothers you. You know, you look, it opens up now and again,
Yeah.
but it's a good band.
You've got
to
one of
go
them, you
test.
say.
I was going to say, I find you quiet on HF.
Yeah.
You're very, you've got one of them voices that's quite
Yeah,
quiet.
So
Yeah.
I've got the lead.
So
yeah,
Mine.
you've got to make sure yours is spot on for it to,
Yeah.
where he's quite loud, isn't he?
Yeah, so you can back this off a bit.
Yeah.
And lead.
Yeah.
Big good that.
yeah. As long as you've got the correct lead
Yeah.
for